we are going to be looking at CSS and the box model. Those two things are in your HTML page as questions or titles that need to be answered or addressed. Okay, so I think it's best to start off with an introduction to selectors. Now, you've already used them without actually realizing it. So, as the title says, identifiers and classes. But we'll cover some of this in this part of the session, not all of it. This certainly going to explain the difference between identifiers, classes, and talk a little bit about their uses. And we will use all of those terms: ID, class, selector, property, value, rule, syntax, compound selectors, or complex selectors. We've used the span tag, and we will use the div tag probably in examples. Okay. So, this is a picture of a box created using HTML, styled with CSS in a web page. And on it says content for ID box. So I think we've already got an idea that that element in a page has got an identifier. What is an identifier? What might an identifier be used for? Who's come across an ID before? Go on. Passport. Passport's an ID, okay. And what do you use it for? Identify yourself to someone who's checking. Someone who doesn't know who you are. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah. So in HTML, an identifier allows you to target something specific within the page and then make amendments to it. This is twofold. We're focusing on CSS, so it allows us to say change the color of something, change the position of something. An identifier has to be unique. So like with passports, your identifiers within your page have to be unique. There can only be one Ben Cornelius. Highlander. You ever seen that before? It's a great film. You should watch it. It's like the foundation of all film history.
Definitely should watch it. Christopher Lambert's accent in it is the dodgiest thing I've ever heard in any film.
Yeah. Okay, so identifier. It means a specific instance of something. In this case, a HTML tag. As I said, we're focusing on CSS, but it could also, in JavaScript, allow you to do much more complex things. Animation, for example, responding to input. So we're focusing on any specific HTML tag which is given a name, and it has to be unique. So it's unique from all other elements. That name makes it unique. So there could be several H2s. Joel, put your headphones on, look at the videos, and get on with it.
I'm not doing the videos. Am I doing the videos now?
Yes, you're doing the videos now.
I thought it was listening to.
No. Okay.
I think you're watching a long video.
Okay, we can use it to position things where we want to put them. That's the main aim. And we can also tell things if we want them to even be there. An example of that, you must have seen websites that have light boxes where you maybe click on an image and a slideshow appears all of a sudden, miraculously, over the top of everything. You used anything like that before? No one's ever clicked on a website with a gallery on it. We can use it to change the contents of the tag with JavaScript, although that's quite advanced and I'm not necessarily expecting you to do that for your websites, but I certainly am expecting you to position elements in the page using identifiers. An ID is prefixed by hash when we are referring to it. So let me think. in your last piece of work before break, when did you use hash, Rob, for the links? So when you put in the link, you put hash and then the identifier, and then that made the link go to the headings that you had given that identifier, and they were all unique. So that's just one application. That's also the way we refer to them when we're typing out CSS. You have seen a tiny bit of CSS if I just flip through to that document. Okay, so you created a file called main CSS, and we did have a quick look at it. So if we were going to refer to one of the identifiers, we'd use the prefix of hash. There's some identifiers have popped up in a drop-down menu. So anything that's within the document that I have open will then pop up. So I can then just quickly say, okay, I want to do something with technologies, which is a heading. And to make it obvious, I will just give it the same attributes as emphasized term for now. I'll say color, red. I'll maybe make the font size. Notice the drop-down menus you get when you type in, which is quite useful. Press return, and then I'll tell it to be 2em, twice as big as it should normally be. I'll just save that file. You see the little asterisk at the top there, you might notice it, which says that the file needs to be saved before anything is seen. If I look in the design view, technologies all of a sudden looks like that. If I look in the live view, it might look slightly bigger. Let's stick to design view then. But you can see there it's gone red. So we know that we've referred to something and we've changed the property of it. Likewise, we used emphasized term. So what was emphasized term? Can you remember what that was? It wasn't an identifier. It was a class. Yeah. I mean, obviously, it's a tag, whatever you tag it in, but it is a class. So that dot represents a class. So you now know two things. Dot means class. Hash means ID. That's about 2/3 way through knowing what you need to know for CSS. Okay, so classes. It's a definition. It's used to identify something in a similar way to a passport. However, it can be reused and applies to many elements, as many elements as you want. So we used it to tell our page that there was emphasized text and that we wanted a specific kind of emphasis on these things that were highlighted. So we added that to this page here and here. We changed it to be italicized and red. Now, there's two ways of looking at the CSS. Currently, if I look at the source code and then the CSS file, we can do it that way. We can also, if we're in the main file, the HTML file, click on CSS Designer, and then on main CSS, it will show me the three rules that I've got. I've got emphasized term. It tells me the properties down here. Row 1, nothing there because I haven't done anything to it yet. Technologies, and there are the properties, which you can just type in or add in using the properties inspector and the plus. Okay. It can be thought of as a blueprint or a mold, and every time it's prefixed by a dot, we've got that. Every time you use one in the blueprint analogy, it's known as instance. It's bringing an instance. So every time we have a class being used, it's an instance of that class. That's a term that you should really come to know, because you will use it later on when we are making games. It's very important in games, the term class. Which one when? Well, an ID is for a unique element. So usually you do that in structure, and classes, obviously many specific elements used perhaps to highlight something or to do something repetitive, give a specific style to a section of things within a page. They can be referenced directly. when you're doing your CSS, but they can also be referenced broadly. So let's say, for example, let's do a new example. In design, I'm going to insert a div tag. Div just stands for division. I'm going to give it an ID of in content. Okay. And then inside of it, I'm going to put a paragraph, which is just going anywhere, to be honest. This is some text. Outside of it, I'm going to put another paragraph in of this is some text. And then I'm going to create some CSS, but I'm going to just do it in this one document. The way I do that, CSS lives in the head. Just put style. Oops, not strong. Style. Everything between these two tags is now styling. And I'm going to create a class for red text. Be a bit of a theme. Color red. And then I'm just going to save that as class example 1 so that I can preview it. So looking in the design view, I can then highlight some text. I'm going to give that the class red text. And this is the class red text. Okay, so it seems evident there that both instances have been given red text. However, because I've got an ID main content, I could also tell it that actually what I want to do is tell any instance of red text within main content, but not anywhere else, to be red. And anything that's called red text elsewhere to be something else. So I can have unique differences. I might have them both to be red. Makes sense if you call it red text. But equally, I might also, in a specific part of the document, say that that is also going to be underlined to bring it out more, or it's going to be a different size, or it's going to be in a different font. And that's kind of an example of nesting. Basically, the way HTML works is you can have tags, but you can also have tags within tags, which can be a little bit confusing sometimes, especially when you look at the code. So, for example, in this page, which just looks like a normal Word document, when you look at the code underneath it, it is starting to get pretty daunting because what we've got 100, just over 100 lines of markup, something that seems relatively simple. Okay, so we looked at the syntax. I've shown you an example in code here, a couple of examples. I'll just split them out a little bit so we can see them separately. There's the selector. That's what points to either the identifier or the class or even the compound selector. As we've seen, 3 different types. There are other types as well. There's something called pseudo selectors. I would advise you to do a little bit of extra reading if you really want to do web design. Pseudo selectors are really quite cool. There's the property. So in this example here, that's my selector, dot emphasized term. I have some squiggly brackets. The squiggly brackets denote the start and the end of the properties that have been affected. And then each line we've got a property. So I've got the property, which is color. After the property, we have a colon to separate the property from the value. So the computer knows what is the value and what is the property. And so no prizes for guessing that red is the value. That's pretty much it. Okay. Please just quickly make